Commander John Hayes stood at the viewport of the USS Fearless, watching the stars blur past as humanity's first interstellar vessel pushed deeper into unexplored space. 6 months into their mission, and the crew had settled into a comfortable routine. Earth seemed like a distant memory now. "Commander, we're picking up an unusual signal," said Communications Officer Peter Wright, his voice cutting through the quiet hum of the bridge. "It's not random, there's a pattern." John moved quickly to Peter's station, leaning over his shoulder to study the display. The signal pulsed in regular intervals, clearly artificial. "How far?" John asked. "About half a light day from our position," Peter replied. "And sir, it's moving." Within minutes the bridge was fully staffed. Science Officer Lisa Murray hunched over her console, analyzing the data streaming in. "It's definitely a ship," Lisa said, tucking a strand of blonde hair behind her ear. "And based on its energy signature, it's using technology we've never seen before." John took a deep breath. First contact, the moment humanity had speculated about for centuries, was about to happen on his watch. "Send the greeting package we prepared," he ordered. "All standard frequencies." The next 12 hours were tense. The crew of the Fearless waited as their message, a carefully crafted combination of mathematical sequences, simple language primers, and basic information about humans, traveled toward the unknown vessel. When the reply came, it wasn't just a signal. It was complete language translation software, transmitted directly to their computers. "They've analyzed our entire language from just the greeting package," Lisa whispered, her eyes wide with wonder. "Whatever they are, they're far beyond us, technologically." The alien vessel approached cautiously. It was beautiful, shaped like a teardrop with glowing blue patterns across its silver hull. No visible weapons, no obvious defensive systems, just elegant design that made the Fearless look clunky and primitive by comparison. "They're requesting permission to send representatives aboard," Peter announced. John straightened his uniform. "Grant it, and tell Dr. Patterson to join us in the docking bay." Dr. Kevin Patterson was the ship's xenobiologist, a man who had spent his career theorizing about alien life. Now his hands shook slightly as he stood beside John in the docking bay waiting. "Steady, Doctor," John said quietly. "You're about to make scientific history." The airlock cycled, and for the first time humans stood face to face with intelligent alien life. They were tall, about 7 feet, with slender bodies covered in feather-like scales in shades of blue and green. Their heads were crested, with large golden eyes set wide apart, giving them an impressive field of vision. 4-fingered hands emerged from flowing robes of shimmering material. "Greetings," the lead alien said, its voice melodic through the translation device it carried. "We are the Vistari. We come in peace and friendship." And just like that, humanity joined the galactic community. The Vistari, it turned out, were members of something called the Galactic Concord. 17 different intelligent species who had formed an alliance of mutual cooperation and scientific exchange. They had detected the Fearless's unique propulsion signature and diverted to investigate. Over the next few days, the humans learned about the Concord's history, its member species, and the vast network of worlds under its protection. In turn, the Vistari learned about Earth and human history. Dr. Patterson found himself working closely with Zaltek, a Vistari scientist specializing in comparative biology. They spent hours exchanging information about their respective species. "Your endurance is remarkable," Zaltek commented one afternoon, reviewing the human medical data. "Vistari would be exhausted after running for just a few minutes, yet humans can run for hours." "Persistence hunting," Kevin explained. "It's how our ancestors caught prey. We couldn't outrun them, but we could outlast them." Zaltek's feathers rippled, a sign of surprise Kevin had learned to recognize. "You hunted by exhausting your prey? How unusual." Similar moments of cultural disconnect happened regularly. When Lisa Murray demonstrated human martial arts in the ship's gym, several Vistari observers left abruptly, visibly disturbed. When Chief Security Officer Ryan Peters described Earth's military history during a cultural exchange, the Vistari delegation grew unnaturally still. You deliberately study the most efficient ways to defeat opponents? One asked, golden eyes blinking rapidly. For thousands of years? Of course, Ryan replied. All human civilizations developed military strategy. It's part of our history. The Vistari exchanged looks but said nothing more. 2 weeks after first contact, the Vistari invited a human delegation to visit the nearest Concord outpost, a massive space station orbiting a gas giant 3 light days away. John selected a team. Himself, Lisa, Kevin, and 5 others representing different specialties. The journey aboard the Vistari ship was comfortable, if strange. The aliens seemed to require very little sleep and ate only plant matter processed into pastes. The space station was a marvel of engineering. A spinning wheel 5 miles across, housing representatives from a dozen conquered species. As humans stepped onto the station for the first time, they couldn't help but notice they were being watched closely. The other aliens were wildly different in appearance. Some insectoid, others reptilian, one species that appeared to be sentient plants, but they shared curious traits. All had eyes set wide apart. All moved with a certain watchful caution, and all seemed both fascinated and nervous around humans. During a formal welcome ceremony, John was introduced to the station's administrator, a tall, willowy being named Kelvara from a species called the Lunari. You humans are most welcome, Kelvara said, bowing slightly. Your species represents something unique to the conquered. How so? John asked. In time, Commander Hayes. All will be explained in time. That evening, at a reception hosted by the Vistari, Kevin found himself cornered by Zaltek, who seemed unusually agitated. There is something you should know, the alien scientist said quietly. Something important about the Concord species. What is it? Zaltek's voice dropped even lower. Have you noticed what we all have in common? The Vistari, the Lunari, the Grell, the others? Kevin thought about it, recalling the dozens of alien species he'd been introduced to. Different sizes, different body types, different evolutionary paths, but there was something, a nervousness, a constant awareness. You're all cautious, Kevin said slowly. Yes. We evolved as prey, Dr. Patterson. Every sentient species in the Concord evolved from prey animals on their homeworlds. Zaltek's golden eyes fixed on Kevin. Until now, humans are the first apex predator species we have ever welcomed into the Concord. Kevin stared at the alien, suddenly understanding the odd reactions, the discomfort during certain discussions, the fascination with human physiology. That's why you're all so interested in us, he said. We're fundamentally different. Yes, Zaltek agreed, and many are afraid of what that might mean. Across the room, John Hayes was having a similar conversation with the Lunari administrator. The implications were sinking in. Humans weren't just new to the galactic community. They were a type of intelligence the Conquered had never fully integrated before. As the reception continued around them, the humans from the Fearless found themselves looking at their new alien allies with fresh eyes. They weren't just meeting new species. They were bridging a fundamental gap in evolutionary history. Predator and prey now trying to build a future together, and neither side was quite sure if it would work. 6 months had passed since first contact. The news of alien life had spread across Earth, causing both excitement and fear. Meanwhile, hundreds of humans had joined exchange programs throughout conquered space, eager to learn about alien cultures and technologies. Olivia Scott wiped sweat from her forehead as she crawled out of the narrow maintenance tube on Concord Station Alpha. As an engineer, she had been assigned to help integrate human technology with Concord systems. The work was fascinating but often frustrating. I still don't understand why you build ships this way, she said to her Vistari counterpart Kelnara. There's almost no redundancy in your life support systems. Kelnara's head tilted in confusion. Why would we need multiple systems? The primary ones work perfectly well. Olivia sighed. After months working alongside the Vistari, she had noticed their strange blind spots. Their ships were beautiful and efficient but vulnerable. No backup systems, minimal shields, and barely any defensive capabilities. It was as if they had never considered that something might attack them. On Earth, we always plan for the worst, she explained. Multiple backups, emergency protocols, defensive systems. Because you evolved expecting threats, Kelnara said quietly. We did not. Across the station, in the Cultural Exchange Wing, military historian Daniel Brooks was giving a lecture to a mixed audience of humans and aliens. His topic, the evolution of human warfare. By the 20th century, mankind had developed the concept of total war, Daniel explained, showing images of World War II battles. Entire societies mobilized for conflict, with industrial production focused on military needs. He continued, unaware of the growing discomfort among the alien delegates. Strategic bombing campaigns targeted enemy infrastructure and sometimes civilian populations to break morale, and a high-pitched keen interrupted him. One of the Grell delegates, an insectoid species, had fallen into what appeared to be a state of shock. Several others were backing away from the screen showing battle footage. Please stop the presentation, requested the Lunari ambassador, her voice shaking. This is difficult for many to process. Daniel switched off the display, confused. I apologize, I didn't realize the material would be so disturbing. Later that evening, the Vistari ambassador explained to Daniel what had happened. You must understand, said Ambassador Zalven, that while all species have experienced conflict, the human approach to warfare is alien to us. The concepts of strategic deception, overwhelming force, psychological warfare, these are predator tactics. But surely your species fought wars, Daniel asked. Our conflicts were ritual competitions for resources. Once dominance was established, fighting stopped. The concept of continuing to attack after establishing superiority. This is not something prey species developed. Daniel thought about this. You're telling me that none of the Concord species ever fought to the death or used strategy in conflicts? Not as humans understand it, the ambassador replied, which is why many now fear what humans might be capable of. Meanwhile, Dr. Kevin Patterson and his Vistari colleague Zaltek had made significant progress in their cross-species medical research. They had developed several treatments that worked across species boundaries, a major breakthrough for the Concord. But Kevin had grown concerned about the Vistari's increasing interest in human adrenal responses. Their questions about human anger, fear, and aggressive behavior had become more focused. Why are you so interested in our stress responses? Kevin finally asked Zaltek one day, after another round of questions about human reactions to threats. Zaltek's feathers rippled, a sign Kevin now recognized as nervousness. I should not tell you this, the alien scientist said. But there is growing concern among the Concord leadership. You are not the first predator species we have encountered. Kevin's eyes widened. There are others like us? Were, Zaltek corrected. 3 other spacefaring species evolved from apex predators. One destroyed itself in war before joining the Concord. One attacked our worlds and was contained in their home system. The third isolated themselves, fearing what contact might bring. And now you're worried we might follow the same path, Kevin said. Some are, yes. The decision to welcome humans into the Concord was controversial. Many believed your species too dangerous. Kevin frowned. So what changed their minds? Your art, Zaltek said. Your music, literature, philosophy. Predator species rarely develop such depth of empathy. It gave us hope that humans might be different. In the quarters assigned to the human delegation, Commander John Hayes met with Earth's newly appointed ambassador to the Concord, Elena Diaz. The news she brought was troubling. They're studying us, Elena said. Not just cultural exchange. They're analyzing our behavior patterns, our reactions to stress, our decision-making processes. The Concord sees us as an experiment. John nodded grimly. Dr. Patterson reported the same thing. They're fascinated by our predatory instincts, but also terrified of them. Can you blame them? Elena asked. Look at human history. We've nearly destroyed ourselves several times, true, John admitted. But we've also built civilizations, created art, explored space. We're more than just predators. Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent call. John answered to find Peter Wright's face on the screen, tense with worry. "Commander, we've received a message from the Fearless. Something's happening at the outer boundaries of conquered space." "What kind of something?" John asked. "An attack. An unknown species has hit a remote conquered outpost, completely destroyed." John felt a chill. "Casualties?" "Total. No survivors." Peter's voice dropped. "The Conquered Council is meeting now. They're panicking. From what we can tell, none of their species has ever faced this kind of unprovoked aggression." Elena and John exchanged looks. After 6 months of being studied as potential threats, humans might soon have to prove they could be protectors instead. "Tell the Fearless to prepare for immediate departure," John ordered, "and contact Dr. Patterson. We need everything he knows about conquered biology and psychology." "What are you planning?" Elena asked after the call ended. John's expression was grim. "The Conquered has never faced a true predator threat. But we have. Throughout our history, we've dealt with aggression, warfare, and violence. If this new species is attacking without provocation, the Concord will need our experience. Even if it means confirming their fears about us?" "Sometimes," John said quietly. "Being the monster isn't about what you are. It's about what you're willing to do to protect others." As night fell on the station, news of the attack spread. Among the Concord species, fear and confusion reigned. They had no protocols for this kind of aggression, no strategies for defense against a determined enemy. But among the humans, a different response emerged. Quiet determination, strategic planning, the instinctive reaction of predators who suddenly found themselves responsible for protecting a galaxy of prey. The Helix moved silently through space, its sleek form a blend of human and Vistari design. On the bridge, Captain Maria Gonzalez studied the tactical display with a frown. The debris field ahead had once been Outpost Zeta 9, home to over 300 Concord citizens. "Anything on sensors?" she asked. "No life signs," reported First Officer Ben Clark. "Based on the radiation decay, the attack happened about 30 hours ago." Maria nodded grimly. The Helix was one of 3 joint human-Vistari research vessels, recently repurposed for this emergency response mission. While not a warship, it was the closest vessel to the attack site and the first to arrive. "Send out the drones. I want a complete scan of the debris." Beside her, the Vistari liaison Zalmor seemed frozen, his golden eyes fixed on the view screen. Like most conquered species, the Vistari had little experience with violence on this scale. "Who would do this?" Zalmor whispered. There was no warning, no demands. Maria had seen enough conflict on Earth to recognize the pattern. Someone who doesn't want to negotiate. Someone who sees your people as targets, not equals. The drones returned data that confirmed her fears. The outpost's destruction had been systematic and thorough. Weapons signatures indicated technology, more advanced than Earth's but not beyond the Concord's capabilities. This wasn't about technological superiority. It was about aggression and intent. "Captain," Ben called, his voice tense. "We're picking up a transmission. It's not on any Concord frequency." The message that played through the bridge speakers was unlike any language Maria had heard before, harsh and guttural. The universal. Translator struggled but eventually produced broken phrases. "Territory claimed. Resistance futile. Resources will be harvested." "Can we trace it?" Maria asked. "Yes. It's coming from a system 3 light days from here. Outside Concord mapped." "Space." Maria made her decision quickly. "Set course. We need to see what we're dealing with." The Helix arrived at the edge of the unmapped system 18 hours later. What they found shocked even the human crew. A fleet of 15 vessels surrounded a small, rocky planet. Dark, angular ships with protruding weapon arrays and no apparent aesthetic considerations. Purely functional war machines. On the planet's surface, mining operations were already underway. "They're stripping the planet," Ben observed. "Automated mining equipment. Very efficient." Maria ordered the Helix to maintain distance and passive scanning only. They observed for 6 hours before being detected. A single enemy vessel broke from the fleet and approached at high speed. It was smaller than the Helix, but bristling with weapons. "They're scanning us," Ben reported, "and they're transmitting." This time, the translator worked better. "Conquered vessel. This territory belongs to the Krivari Dominion. Depart immediately or be destroyed." Maria opened a channel. "This is Captain Maria Gonzalez of the research vessel Helix. We mean no harm. We wish to discuss the recent attack on Outpost Zeta 9. A harsh laugh came through the speakers. Then, in perfect English, "There is nothing to discuss. The weak make way for the strong. The conquered has lived in ignorance of this universal truth. No longer." The communication cut off abruptly. The Krivari vessel powered weapons, evasive maneuvers, Maria ordered. The Helix barely escaped, sustaining damage to its outer hull before jumping to safety. But they had learned valuable information and captured images of their new enemy. 2 days later, the Conquered Council convened an emergency session on Station Alpha. Representatives from all 17 member species gathered to hear the Helix's report and decide on a response. Maria stood before them, flanked by Zalmor and Commander John Hayes, who had been called in for his military expertise. "The species calls themselves the Krivari," Maria explained, projecting images onto the large screen. "They appear reptilian, bipedal, with highly developed frontal lobes suggesting advanced cognition. The images showed scaled humanoids with prominent jaw ridges and eyes set forward in their faces, predator eyes, like those of humans. Their technology is combat-focused. They've claimed the entire Epsilon sector as their territory and have already destroyed 2 outposts. Based on their communication, they view the conquered species as weak and their territories as ripe for taking." Murmurs of fear rippled through the council chamber. "What do they want?" asked the Lunari representative, her voice quavering. "Resources, territory, and dominance," John answered bluntly. "Classic predator expansion. They're not interested in coexistence." The council descended into chaotic discussion. Many representatives called for immediate diplomatic outreach. Others suggested offering trade agreements or territorial concessions. When the conquered High Chancellor finally called for order, the proposed response left the humans stunned. "The Concord will withdraw all presence from the affected sectors," the Chancellor announced. "We will establish new borders 3 systems back from current positions and increase monitoring of the boundary." "You're just going to give them what they want?" Maria asked incredulously. The Chancellor blinked slowly. "It is our way. We avoid conflict. We preserve life." "And the colonists in those systems?" John demanded. "There are millions of your people living there." "Evacuation protocols are being established," the Chancellor replied. "Most can be relocated within 60 days. "And those who can't be evacuated in time?" The Chancellor had no answer. The meeting adjourned with the retreat plan approved despite human objections. Outside the council chamber, John met with Lieutenant William Foster, a tactical officer from the Fearless. "They're making a huge mistake," William said. "The Krivari won't stop with those systems. This kind of retreat just signals weakness to a predator species." John nodded grimly. "We need more information. The Concord has no real intelligence on the Krivari fleet strength or plans." William glanced around to ensure they weren't overheard. "I have an idea, sir. Not exactly within Concord protocols, but go on. I can take a small team in a modified shuttle, slip past their patrols, gather intelligence on their fleet movements and capabilities." "That's extremely risky," John warned. "Yes, sir. But it's what humans do, isn't it? Take risks when necessary." John considered for a moment. "Do it, but unofficial. If you're caught, the Concord didn't authorize this." "Understood, Commander." 3 days later, William and his team of 4 returned with data that changed everything. Using stealth technology developed on Earth but enhanced with conquered materials, they had managed to penetrate deep into Krivari-held space. "They're not just claiming territory," William reported to a small group of human officers and their most trusted Vistari allies. "They're systematically harvesting worlds, stripping them of resources, taking some populations as slave labor, eliminating others entirely." He projected a star chart showing Krivari fleet movements. And this is their next target, he said, highlighting a large blue world. Vistal colony, population 3 million, mostly civilians. Dr. Kevin Patterson studied the data with growing horror. The Concord evacuation plan won't be ready in time. At the Krivari's current speed, they'll reach Vistal in less than 2 weeks. Really me? Concord Council won't change their approach, Zaltek said sadly. They cannot comprehend a response other than retreat. John Hayes looked around the room at the human officers. In their eyes, he saw the same determination he felt. Then we'll have to show them another way, he said quietly. Even if it means becoming the monster the Concord has always feared we might be. Admiral Grace Chen arrived at Station Alpha aboard the Earth vessel Defender 3 days after the Emergency Council meeting. She had been the highest-ranking human military officer in Earth's space program before first contact. Now, all human ships in Concord space fell under her command. She called an immediate meeting of all human captains and senior officers. 32 humans gathered in a secure conference room, along with 7 Vistari who had aligned themselves with the human position. The situation is clear, Grace said, standing before a display of the star map. The Concord will not defend its territory. The Krivari will reach Vistal Colony in 10 days. 3 million civilians will be at their mercy, and based on Lieutenant Foster's intelligence, mercy is not something the Krivari possess. She turned to face the assembled officers. I am forming a defensive fleet. Participation is voluntary and technically against Concord directives. Anyone who wishes to follow council orders and withdraw should leave now. Not a single person moved. Grace nodded, a hint of pride in her otherwise stern expression. Then, let's get to work. We have 10 days to prepare a defense for a colony the Concord has already written off. The next week passed in frantic activity. Every human ship in the sector, 8 vessels including the Fearless and the Helix, was retrofitted with weapon systems. Engineers like Olivia Scott worked around the clock, adapting Concord technology for defensive and offensive capabilities it was never designed for. The Concord has amazing energy projection technology, Olivia explained to Grace during an inspection. They use it for scientific instruments and terraforming. We've modified it to create shield systems and directed energy weapons. Grace ran, her hand along a newly installed weapons array. Will it be enough? On paper, we're still outgunned 3-1. But the Krivari won't be expecting resistance. That gives us an advantage. Meanwhile, Dr. Kevin Patterson worked with a small team to analyze the Krivari biology from the limited samples William Foster's team had collected. Their vision is exceptional in normal light, but severely limited in ultraviolet ranges, Kevin reported. And their communication relies heavily on subvocal frequencies, sounds below what most Concord species can hear, but our equipment can detect and jam. As preparations continued, word leaked to the Concord Council. The High Chancellor summoned John Hayes and Grace Chen to explain their actions. You are preparing for war, the Chancellor said, eyes wide with dismay. This violates the fundamental principles of the Concord. We are preparing to defend innocent lives, Grace replied calmly. Something your people seem unwilling to do. The evacuation will not be completed in time, John interrupted. You know this. Millions will be abandoned to face the Krivari alone. The Chancellor's gaze moved from one human to the other. We have observed your activities with growing concern. Your weapons modifications, your tactical planning sessions, your psychological warfare strategies. Grace raised an eyebrow. You've been spying on us? Monitoring, the Chancellor corrected. And we have discovered disturbing information. Your science officer Murray found chemical compounds in your food synthesizers designed to suppress human aggression. Subtle psychological techniques in station lighting and sound patterns meant to promote compliance. John felt a cold anger rise within him. You've been trying to change us, make us more like you. To help you overcome your violent nature, the Chancellor said. For your own good and the good of the Concord. Grace leaned forward. Our violent nature is exactly what you need right now. The Concord has never faced a true predator threat before. We have. Throughout human history, we've learned how to fight predators by becoming better predators ourselves. The Chancellor recoiled slightly. You speak of this with pride. I speak of it as reality, Grace answered. We can choose to use our aggressive instincts for protection rather than conquest. That's the difference between us and the Krivari. The meeting ended in an impasse. The Council would not endorse the Human Defense Plan, but neither would they actively prevent it. As they left the Council chamber, John turned to Grace. We're on our own, aren't we? Not entirely, came a voice from the shadows. Zaltek stepped forward, accompanied by several other Vistarian representatives from 3 other Concord species. Many of us recognize the truth of your words, Zaltek said. The Concord cannot survive by retreat alone. We wish to help. One of the other aliens, a plant-like being named Fal, spoke up. We have no warriors among us, but we have scientists, engineers, and resources. And we have this, added another Vistari, displaying a data crystal. Complete scans of Vistal's defense grid. It has never been activated, built only as a precaution. But it exists. Grace took the crystal, hope sparking in her eyes. This changes our odds significantly. 2 days before the Krivari were expected to reach Vistal, psychological warfare, expert Samantha Reyes presented her strategy to Grace and the other captains. The Krivari operate like apex predators, Samantha explained. They expect fear and submission. Their communications show contempt for species they consider prey, which includes all Concord members. We can use this against them. Her plan was met with discomfort from the Vistari observers. The idea of deliberately manipulating another species' psychology seemed deeply wrong to them. Your plan involves deception, Zaltek said slowly. Feigning weakness, then striking with hidden strength. This is difficult for us to comprehend. It's how smaller predators survive against larger ones, Samantha replied. And right now we are the smaller predator. As the human fleet moved into position around Vistal Colony, word of their actions spread throughout conquered space. Many were horrified by the humans' decision to fight. Others watched with a mixture of fear and hope. On the Fearless, now serving as the fleet's command ship, Grace Chen delivered a final message to the Concord Council. We understand your concerns about human aggression. Perhaps you're right to fear what we might become. But today that aggressive nature will be used to protect, not destroy. We will defend Vistal Colony and its people against the Krivari threat. We ask for your support, but we will proceed without it if necessary. Either way, humanity will not stand by while innocent lives are threatened, not while we have the power to act. The message was met with silence from the Council, but across Concord space, individual ships began to change course, heading toward Vistal. Not many. A handful at first, then dozens. Not to fight, but to provide support, medical aid, and evacuation assistance if needed. As the Krivari fleet appeared at the edge of the system, Grace stood on the bridge of the Fearless and gave the order that would forever change how the Concord viewed humanity. All ships, battle stations, the line must be held here, whatever the cost. And in that moment, humans embraced the monster. The conquered feared, becoming predators with purpose, hunters with a cause. Not for conquest, but for protection. The Krivari fleet entered the Vistal system with overwhelming force. 27 warships against 8 human vessels and a handful of converted Concord science ships. The odds were terrible. Admiral Grace Chen watched from the bridge of the Fearless as the enemy approached. The crew around her was tense but focused. They knew what was at stake. Enemy fleet has entered sensor range, reported Lieutenant Foster. They're moving in standard attack formation. No sign they've detected our trap. Grace nodded. Samantha Reyes's strategy was working so far. The humans had positioned their ships to appear disorganized, as if hastily assembled. Meanwhile, the defensive grid around Vistal Colony remained powered down, invisible to Krivari scans. All ships maintain position, Grace ordered. Let them come to us. On the planet below, evacuations continued frantically. Dr. Patterson and Zaltek coordinated, Medical teams preparing for casualties. The Vistari colonists watched the skies with fear, many seeing humans for the first time and uncertain whether to fear these new predators more than the approaching Krivari. The Krivari commander's message came exactly as expected. Attention human vessels. Your presence is noted. Your destruction is imminent. Surrender now, and you may serve the Dominion. Grace smiled coldly. Open a channel. When connected, she spoke clearly. This is Admiral Grace Chen of Earth. We've studied your tactics. Krivari? You prey on the weak. You've never faced a real fight. Today that changes. The Krivari commander appeared on screen. Reptilian features twisted in what might have been amusement. Your species is unknown to us, but your arrogance is noted. You defend prey species. This makes you weak. You're wrong, Grace replied. It makes us protective, and there's nothing more dangerous than a predator protecting its own. She cut the transmission and gave the signal. Execute Plan Alpha. The battle began with a brilliant flash of light. Human engineers had adapted conquered terraforming technology to create electromagnetic pulses that temporarily blinded the Krivari's sensitive vision. As the enemy fleet faltered, the human ships attacked from multiple vectors. The Helix, commanded by Maria Gonzalez, led a squadron that targeted the smaller Krivari vessels. The retrofitted weapons performed better than expected, cutting through enemy shields. We've neutralized 2 enemy destroyers, Maria reported, moving to secondary targets, but the Krivari recovered quickly. They were experienced warriors adapting to human tactics with predatory efficiency. 3 Concord support vessels were destroyed in a brutal counterattack. The human ship Aurora took heavy damage. On the Fearless, Grace watched the battle unfold, with grim determination. They're targeting our weaker ships first. Classic predator behavior. It's time for Phase 2. She gave the signal. Across the battlefield, human ships suddenly changed tactics. Instead of fighting individually, they moved in perfect coordination, protecting each other's weaknesses. Meanwhile, on Vistal's surface, the defense grid powered up, not firing weapons but jamming Krivari communications with frequencies that caused pain to their sensitive hearing. The Krivari command ship, a massive dreadnought at the center of their fleet, began to focus its weapons on the Fearless. The human flagship shuddered under the assault. Shields at 30%, reported the tactical officer. We can't take much more of this. Grace opened a channel to all human ships. Initiate Wolverine Protocol. It was their most desperate gambit. Named after Earth's most ferocious small predator, the tactic involved all human ships deliberately taking damage to get close enough to inflict maximum harm on the enemy. John Hayes, commanding a strike team on the cruiser Intrepid, led the charge, directly at the Krivari flagship. All hands, brace for impact. The Intrepid absorbed punishing fire as it closed distance. On the bridge, a console exploded, sending 2 crew members flying. John ignored the blood running down his face from a gash on his forehead. Maintain course, weapons range in 20 seconds. Across the human fleet, similar scenes played out. Officers continued giving orders despite injuries. Engineers worked in smoke-filled compartments to keep systems online. Medics treated the wounded who refused to leave their posts. Watching through long-range sensors, the Vistari and other conquered observers were stunned. They had never seen such behavior, continuing to fight despite injuries that would incapacitate their own species, ignoring pain, pushing beyond normal limits. They're like nothing we've ever seen, whispered a Lunari scientist on Station Alpha. No, corrected Zalven, the Vistari ambassador. They're exactly what we feared they might be. And right now, that's exactly what we need. The battle reached its climax when the Krivari flagship targeted the evacuation ships leaving Vistal. The massive dreadnought turned its main weapons toward Mayhem, the defenseless transports carrying thousands of civilians. Captain Maria Gonzalez saw it happening from the bridge of the damaged Helix. Half her crew was dead or injured. The ship's systems were failing. They're going after the evacuation ships, she reported to Admiral Chen. We're the only vessel in position to intercept. Grace's voice was solemn over the comm. Do what you must, Captain. Maria looked around, at her remaining crew. Plot intercept course, maximum speed. The Helix surged forward, placing itself between the Krivari flagship and the evacuation transports. The enemy vessel fired its main weapon, a devastating energy beam that cut through what remained of the Helix's shields. Divert all power to engines, Maria ordered. Ram the target. Her first officer, Ben Clark, looked at her with understanding. It's been an honor, Captain. The Helix slammed into the Krivari flagship's main weapon array at full speed. The resulting explosion tore through both vessels, destroying the Helix completely and crippling the enemy dreadnought. The sacrifice changed the tide of battle. Human vessels pressed the advantage, targeting the flagship's weakened defenses. The Krivari, who had never faced an enemy willing to sacrifice themselves, began to retreat in disarray. 2 hours later, it was over. The Krivari fleet had withdrawn from the system, leaving behind 7 destroyed vessels. The human fleet had lost 3 ships, including the Helix, with every surviving vessel damaged. But Vistal Colony had been saved. 3 days after the battle, the conquered High Council convened an emergency session. Admiral Grace Chen and Commander John Hayes stood before them, still bearing injuries from the fight. You disobeyed direct orders, the Chancellor stated. You engaged in violence on a scale unprecedented in conquered history. We did what was necessary, Grace replied simply. Yes, the Chancellor admitted after a long pause. You did. And in doing so, you have changed the conquered forever. The Council had reviewed the battle recordings. They had seen humans fight through injuries, sacrifice themselves for others, use strategy and deception against a superior force. Everything they had feared about human nature had been displayed in that battle, and yet used not for conquest, but for protection. The Concord has existed for 3,000 years, the Chancellor continued. In all that time, we prey species have survived by avoiding conflict, by retreating from threats. But the galaxy is changing. The Krivari will return, and there may be others like them. John stepped forward. Humanity doesn't want to change what the Concord is. We don't want a militarized alliance. But sometimes you need someone willing to fight, so others don't have to. The Chancellor's gaze moved between the 2 humans. You became the monster we always feared, and you did it to save us. That's what humans do, Grace said quietly. We can be terrible and wonderful in equal measure. We can create art and wage war, build and destroy. Our history is filled with both. But when we find something worth protecting, there is nothing we won't do to keep it safe. 2 weeks later, a new classification was created in the Concord database. Humans were designated as guardian predators, the first such entry in their vast records, and across conquered space, the prey species looked at their human allies with new eyes, still wary, still sometimes afraid, but grateful that when darkness came to their door, humanity stood ready to become the monster that monsters fear.